Can you spot the greatest move that Garry Kasparov ever played? So this is arguably the move of the century, and it was played against Veselin Topalov in 1999 at Wijk. So Topalov has just played queen into d6. He's looking to trade these ones off. Garry has a number of pieces in the attack around the black king. We can see this knight here looming over the position. We've got queen cutting down here. The bishop is raking along here. And there's also this opportunity for the rook to join the attack on e7. So how do you piece this all together into a stunning combination? Well, this is where Garry unleashed the amazing rook takes on d4. Wow, what a thunderbolt of a move. Giving up a whole rook for a pawn. Now, if you take the queen here, which maybe Topalov wanted to do, you just recapture with the rook and you've won a pawn. So Topalov takes that rook. Thanks very much, I'll have your rook. How does Garry proceed? Well, you don't take back immediately with check. If you do that, the queen can block. And now if you come down here with this check, we can simply interpose with a rook. No good. So coming back here, Garry pieces it together in a different manner. First he plays rook e7 check. This is the beautiful follow-up. Now if the queen captures this rook, which didn't happen, then we check on d4, and now the queen can no longer interpose on b6. So the king has to step back. We check on b6. Now let's say the bishop blocks, because you don't want to go with the queen and lose it to the knight. And now the king can't move here, the queen covers here, so knight c6 check can come, pinned by the bishop to the queen here. And now the king has to move away, and we don't even pick up the queen, we mate in the corner on a7. So that's why, coming back here, black couldn't actually take this rook on e7. So the king staggers up the board now to b6. We have queen takes on d4 check. Again, you can't interpose with the queen, or we actually take this knight with check. It's still a devastating attack, and you're a knight down. So instead, Topalov keeps coming up the board. He moves into a5, snapping off that knight. And here, Kasparov starts using all the pieces now, pawn to b4. Beautiful continuation. The king comes into a4 now. How do you continue? Well, you want to try and checkmate the king here. So queen c3, threatening queen b3, mate. So black has to cover that square. You still don't have time to pick up the rook. So queen d5 was played, covering b3. And now rook to a7. Garry threatens checkmate in another manner, this time by taking with the rook on a6. Now Topalov covers with the bishop here. Say he covered with the rook. Well, this is no good because king b2 is extremely powerful, and there's actually no way to stop the threat of queen b3 check, followed by pawn captures with mate after that black queen takes. And if you try and play, say, queen d4, well, we just chop. After rook takes back, this is mate. So coming back here, after this move of rook to a7, we had bishop to b7 covering a6. Now the rook took that bishop. Still you can't recapture, or we mate here. We had queen to c4. Topalov desperately trying to get those queens off the board, but the queen now picked up this knight on f6. So white is only an exchange down now, and still the attack rages on. Now the best defense here for black actually would have been to play rook d1 check, because it forces the king to b2 here. Now you go to a8 with the other rook, covering a6, and the key here is that after a move like, say, queen to b6, threatening mate, black can actually get the queens off the board with queen d4 check. You've forced this king up to b2 with this rook move, you see. And this position could arise like this. White can take on f7 and is a bit better, but black's still in the game. But this wasn't played. There was no rook d1 check. Instead, Topalov took this pawn on a3 instead. And his idea is that after white takes, now it's not checkmate because you can take on b4. So that's what happened. And now if you want to pause again and think about how to continue the attack here, then please do so. So pawn to c3 was played, another stunning move. Now the king took the pawn. What happens if the queen takes? Well, now we have queen takes on b5 with check. The queen just left that c4 square, of course. Now the king would have to come down here, and now rook a7 check comes, queen a5, and you're delivering mate. So you can't take with the queen. The king had to take the pawn. The queen checked here, and the king came to d2 now. Again, if you come back to the b file, then you're running into problems like this with queen b2 check. And again, if you interpose the queen, we take here with check, we're winning. If you come to the a file or the c file, then there's a ton of different rook moves which are basically going to pick up the queen. So that's why the king came to the d file instead. Now we had queen b2 check, and the king came to d1. It can't step to the e file here, or we deliver this deadly check from behind, and that's what black's trying to avoid. And now once again, how do you continue the attack? Please do pause if you want to look for this. So bishop f1 came. What a move. So you're decoying the queen away if that one's taken from the mating squares, because now queen c2 check comes, you've left that c4 square, forcing the king to the e file. Now there's rook e7. The queen has to block, and we mate like this. Lovely decoy tactics going on in this game. So the bishop wasn't taken. Instead, we had an amazing defensive resource from Topalov. Rook to d2 check. Not check, rather, hitting the queen. This game is very complicated, I appreciate. And now again, there's only one move to continue the attack here. It's quite phenomenal. You can't take this rook, for example, or now you're the one getting checkmated with queen c1. So instead of this, what did Kasparov do? Brought another piece into the attack. Rook into d7. Now that rook is pinned to the king, so you don't have time to pick up the queen here. So Topalov took that rook, but now bishop takes on c4 was played. And not only do you need to recapture the bishop, but your rook is also hanging. Now if you try and save the rook, let's say like this, well, you're running into mate with queen e2. There were other ways to mate as well. So the bishop had to be recaptured. Kasparov picked up here, and now he just has a queen for a rook and a pawn, which is an overwhelming material advantage. So the pawn was attacked, Kasparov defended it. The pawn came to c3, queen a4 check, king e1, pawn to f4 saves the pawn, and actually there's nothing here for black to do. We had f5, king c1, rook d2, and after queen a7, here Topalov actually resigned. Soon the material will be hoovered up with all the checks that white can give, and then the queen will decide the day in combination with the pawns. If you want to see another bonkers game, then click here to watch Alireza Firouzja against Wesley So. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.